So I was not raised in the tradition at all. From St. Croix, Virgin Islands. So I grew up, I was raised Roman Catholic. You know, my mom was in church. I went to church. And so I did not become aware of African spiritual traditions until I would say my mid 20s. That's when I started to become aware. And then at one point, even before the crisis with my son, I had started to study Ifa a bit. And then at one point, I started feeling, you know what? I don't think this is for me, right? So this was before my own journey, before my son started getting into trouble. So you know what? I don't think this is really for me. And I was just fine living life until this crisis started happening, and this is what brought me back. And so I believe that some of us are called just by the ancestors to do this, and that part of the reason why we're being called back is because the ancestors are trying to bring healing not only to us but to the community. And the only way for them to do that is to, I was about to use the term, hijack the minds and the spirits of people who want to be hijacked, right? But they have to do that so that they could do this. And so it's because even though I do this work, there are days when I find it hard to believe that this is what I do, that I don't report to a job, that this is what I do day in, day out.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so, if you could tell us more about, you mentioned that you became initiated. So, what was
Mhm.
that whole process like? Is it because is it solely a case of you got initiated because you knew that this was the steps, the process you had to go through in order to heal your son? And what was that journey like for you?
So going to Nigeria, this was in 2003. It was a difficult time because even though I realized, I knew intuitively that this was the path for me, because the reading that I had was so strong. It was like, when I look at my life, many times I think about it in terms of before I had that pivotal reading and after that. It was like
Mm,
A and B. My life is divided like that. Having said that, though, going to Nigeria was still a very difficult experience because my son was with me. And even though I was going with the hope that my elders could help him, I didn't know for a fact that that would happen. It was like, while I was there in Nigeria, I kept thinking, well, what is going to happen when we get back to the United States? This is
mm,
what I was thinking about. Um, and also going to Nigeria for the first time, it helped me to realize that even if we are open minded, it's not always easy to look at the traditions of Africa in a neutral lens. Because why? We've been indoctrinated a certain way. And we've been taught to look at some things are spiritual, some things are not spiritual. And when it comes to the things that are from Africa, we've been conditioned to think, oh, they're not, that's not so spiritual anyway. Right. So I went, my son was not initiated into the tradition, like, but my elders over there, they did a lot of ritual work on him. There was spiritual bath that they did. There was food or medicines that they gave him to eat. And so my son actually stayed in Nigeria after I came back to the United States. So I came back first, and he came back maybe about a week or two later.
okay.
And so while I was in Nigeria, my elders just said, "You're going to see good things in your family," right? And so, but when they said that, I didn't know if they were saying that to make me feel good or if I would really see those changes. So it was a very difficult moment. It was a very stressful, difficult time. So it's not like I went to Nigeria and I said to myself, "Oh my God, this is so great. I'm so glad I came. This is going to be wonderful. It's all going to work out." No, I didn't. I came back. When I came back, I remember I was just feeling down. Like, I went all the way to Nigeria, and I don't even know if this is going to work out for
Mm,
us.
mm,
That's how stressful that period was. I don't know if this is going to work out, you know? And I was thinking, well, I don't even know if this is going to be worth the investment, you know? That's how I felt because it was just so much, you
yeah.
know? Um,
So go ahead.
yes. But when I look back now at all the things that have happened in my life since then, all I could do is give praise and thanks to the ancestors. And so honestly, as I look at my life today and how things are, just very little I can complain about because it wouldn't be right, because I've just seen so many blessings in so many different ways that I have almost zero to complain about. I mean, yes, I could find some things to complain about, but it would not be right. because
Yeah.
I understand the struggles that other people face, and so I'm very sensitive to the suffering of others and what they're going through emotionally, what they're going through financially. My journey has made me very, very, very sensitive to the struggles of the human condition and what people struggle with day in, day out.
So through everything that happened with your son, you ended up not only providing healing, but then you also found your own purpose. So, if you'd like to speak more on how that whole process of going to Nigeria, getting initiated, how has that changed you and opened up your path? Because you mentioned before you had the whole 9 to 5, and now you have
Yes.
a completely different reality.
Yeah, exactly. So what happened was, so after I came back from Nigeria, I was working for corporate America, and I continued working for corporate America until around 2011. And so what happened, how I ended up leaving my job is at the end, things on the job were not going well. So a theme that I like to show the audience is the idea of conflict and adversity as being good for us. So things at work were not going well. For a while, it was going well, but then I started dreading my boss. You know, my performance review was not good. And so I decided to leave. And so when I left, it was the idea that I'm going to work on my film. And so one of the things that surprised me when I left, when things were not going well, is that nobody in my family cared about that job anyway. Nobody thought, I thought my family would be depressed and fall apart. Like, how are we going to survive? Nobody cared. Nobody, nobody was depressed or upset about it in any way. So that was interesting to me. And so what happened um, about 2 years after that, that's when I started doing the divination work. I had already been trained by my mentors, but so everything happened in an organic, natural way. But I didn't leave work with the plan. Oh, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to support myself. Everything happened in an organic way. So one of the things I'd like to share with audiences is like as I look at my journey, it would look like there was no plan whatsoever. It's like one haphazard thing to one haphazard thing to another haphazard thing, but it's just part of a divine plan. But it just looked haphazard. The whole thing, you know, how it happened, when things happened, it just looks like chaos. But it's part of how the ancestors were organizing things in my life. And so, what I would like to share with the audience is the ancestors in your life, you're trying to organize things. So even if it looks chaotic, it doesn't mean that it's going to stay that way. It maybe take you to a place that feels better, that feels right. You know.
Beautiful. And one of the things I want to say to you is that from years now, so you said you kind of left the corporate world in about 2011. Is that when you actually joined Facebook and set up the Acosta
So
Group?
so no, the Facebook page started around 2009.
Okay.
And
Okay.
because someone said, "Oh, what happened was after I came back from this." So the back part of the backstory is after I came back from Africa the first time, I took some photographs because I have a background in photography also, and I created this calendar called the Sacred Journey. This was in 2007, 2008, and while I was promoting that calendar through a series of podcasts, the person who was helping with the podcast said, "Well, why don't you make a film? Call it the Sacred Journey, whatever." And I never thought about that. And that's when I got the idea, well, I should create a film. Why not? Of course, if I knew back then how long it would be, I would have probably said no. But so that's when I created the page, the 2009 page. And so one day I woke up, I just started sharing some things, and the audience grew to like 40 people. And then I woke up another day and it was 100. Then I woke up another day and it was 200. And then I woke up another day and it just grew exponentially until Facebook started messing with the algorithms, right? That slowed down the
Yes.
growth of all people, right? Yes.
Yeah, because I was gonna say that for me, your page has been so inspirational over the years. Like I would just look at your posts and I'm like, are you just coming up with this off the top of your head? Like your words of wisdom are so powerful. And even just speaking to you now, you can see it when you speak. It's almost like you're a poet. Like you have this natural gift of expressing yourself. So you can see that you're naturally creative. And I found that your page has been so inspirational for many people. So I just want to give you thanks because you gave us thanks at the beginning, but you have been consistently doing this as well. And, we love the information that you're putting out there in terms of uplifting and upholding the traditions. I think it's phenomenal.
Well, thank you. And so I see it as a labor of love, and I see it as the way how I see it is that I believe I know that someone out there in the world needs some encouragement. And so I could not ever like skip a day. So like the day my mom died, I still shared something. The day I
Wow.
buried my mom, I shared something.
Wow.
So if I was about to go into the hospital for surgery, I would still do it. If somebody said, "Oh, James, you only have 2 hours left on work, 2 hours left to live in the world," I would still do it. And
Wow.
it's because of love. It's because I feel as we grow, we realize that our purpose is bigger than who we are as a person, right? It's about what we can give to someone else. And I believe that deep in the human spirit, there's something deep in this human spirit that likes to nurture, that likes to give, and that finds joy in giving, you know? And that's the position I come from, of finding ways to give, because at the end of the day, to me, that's what life is, you know?
Lovely, beautiful. So it's at this stage of the interview where I'd say if anybody has any questions that they would like to put into James Weeks, he's here, he's available. Are you happy to stay with us for a total of about 1 hour and a half today? Are you free?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
wonderful. So please, if you do have any questions about his personal journey, any practices he does, then please send them through. For now, I'm going to get in there with some of my own. So, one of the questions that we get quite a lot is, how people can start to develop themselves spiritually. I would like to know from your perspective, what would you recommend that people do? Something straightforward that anyone can do as a means to develop themselves.
So I would say one practice would be just sitting in silence, sitting in stillness on a daily basis. So that's what one of my mentors always says: just sit in stillness, take time out, sit in some stillness, sit in some silence. That would be a practice unto itself. It could be daily prayer, or daily prayer or meditation. It could be, if you have an altar, and it could be focusing on a candle. It could be pouring libations to your ancestors. It could be spending time in nature. It's more about the intent behind it, whatever the intent is. And that's what distinguishes just an ordinary act from a spiritual act. It's the intention behind it. So if we intend we're going to get ourselves in a position to connect with ancestors, so that's the intent. Or if our intent is we're going to connect with our higher selves, that's our intent. So it's more about the intent. And most important is the consistency, And so one of my mentors always says is that spirituality is like a flower, right? But we can't expect the flower to just be there because we want it to be there. Something that we have to cultivate, and it happens over time. So part of the spirit. So what I always suggest to people is, I believe that the spiritual practice, whatever we choose, is something we must be militant about. When I say militant, it means that we're not going to sacrifice it for anything, right? We're going to set aside 10, 15 minutes a day, whatever, and we're going to do this. But what happens to a lot of people is they sacrifice this. They don't do this. They do everything else. So people take a shower and they'll go to work, right? But I believe we need spiritual hygiene too. So what happens is that so people have all these other things to do. Oh, I had to go to work. Oh, I had to prepare dinner. Oh, I had to whatever. All these things to do, but taking care of oneself is not on their to-do list at all. And so what happens is that, well, eventually they break down, because they have to, because they are not giving their spirit. We need to give our spirit something to work with, and we need to give our ancestors something to work with. So the key is consistency, um, daily. daily. It's just crucial that I feel that we do this daily, and that helps us to become more receptive to the ancestors, to spirit, to what's being said to us. So one analogy that I like to give, if we don't have a practice, it's like we have a cell phone, but the cell phone is turned off. So that
Hmm.
how do we expect messages to come through? We're not our cell phones are not on. It's off, you know? And then when you think about how dysfunctional the world is every single day, all the negativity out there, every day when we go out in the world, we interact with the world. Our spirits are interacting with all of that dysfunction, the anger, hatred, the disease, whatever, depression, anxiety, overwhelm. And so if we're not giving our spirit something, it's like, in a sense, I'm going to use um, an expression. It's like we're unvaccinated in a spiritual way, right? We're just going out, we're exposing ourselves unnecessarily to things, energies that are not helpful for us, you know?
Beautiful. And I agree with that because, this is something we come across a lot is that most people get so caught up with the elaborate rituals and all of these things. But what spirituality really comes down to is our own level of consistency and being able to give that dedicated time and effort. And the analogy you used was actually quite good. I mean, about the flower. I think it's Professor Baina Bello in our Spirit is Eternal documentary who says spirituality is like a muscle, and so you have to keep developing and working it. And it's so true. I mean, the more you develop your muscles, the more they grow, they become strong. So it's the same wisdom being expressed. So that is beautiful. I believe I saw somebody come with it's just a comment, not a question. But Shaki says, I have responded to my calling to be a healer from my Yoruba side, mother's side. So, in your case, you accepted your calling. And so, I would love you to speak on the importance of having a calling and following it and believing in it, because a lot of us may have this kind of niggling in our head that we know we're supposed to do something, but there's this resistance. I mean, what would you say about that?
I'll have a lot to say about this. So a lot. So one of the things I have to say is, I believe that on some level, throughout our lives, we're always being prepared. So I feel that the ancestors are working in stages, but they can't. In order for us to become all of what we are meant to be, they can't show us too much at once, because it will overwhelm us and it will actually distract us. So they can't tell us every single thing about purpose. So what will happen is that bit by bit, they'll have us work on something. So for example, in my case, uh, back in my mid 20s, I was working at a newspaper and I was writing for a living. I worked in a newspaper. I was writing articles about things that intrigued me, about cultural things, and that's where the practice of writing happened for me. But that skill was necessary to write a book now about this particular subject. But this happened before I got initiated in the tradition. So I believe in all of our lives, the ancestors are spirit. They're equipping us. Even the jobs that we do that might seem not related to our calling might be related in some way.
Hmm.
And so the most one of the important things I would say about calling is to not overthink it, right? And so this is one of the issues that people struggle with, is they think too much. So, and they don't believe anything that they're thinking about. It's like one day they're thinking, well, I feel I should be doing this. I feel I should be a healer. Then the next day, I'm not sure if I should be a healer. And then, um, what happens is that people start going in circles because they're not following through on what their own spirit is telling them. So they start to drift. That's what happens. They start to drift, and then they drift, and then they need another confirmation, and then they need another sign, then they need another reading, and then they need somebody else, some other reader to tell them the same thing, and then another diviner has to tell them the same thing. Then they need a tarot card reading, and then that's not enough, and then they need to go to the beach and throw some cowrie shells, and then that's not enough, and then they need to go to talk to some woman in the market, and then that's not enough, and then they need to go do something else, and that's so. Then what happens to a lot of people? Then nothing is never enough, and then so what happens is some people end up becoming like professional message collectors. You know what I mean? Sign
Yeah.
collectors. I'm collecting some signs. I had another sign today. Well, but what about
Yeah.
all the signs you've been receiving all this time, right? And
Yeah.
so that's not a healthy place to be in, a sign collector, a message collector. So we have to do something with the guidance that we've been receiving. And one way is we must not overthink it, just follow it. And so I feel that I believe in simplicity, and I feel that the more we develop, there's almost nothing to think about. There's almost what is there to think about? You just go into the space of your heart where the feeling comes, and so many times when I'm making a decision, I just go. I just ask myself, how do you feel about this, James? And it's instantaneous. I'm doing this or I'm not doing it. I'm not thinking about it beyond that, you know? And so that's one of the things. The other thing I would say is understanding that adversity is part of everybody's journey. And so what happens to a lot of people, they get some pushback, they face some obstacle or a lot of obstacles, and they start questioning. Well, I don't think I'm meant to do this because this happened. Look what happened. Nobody supported me. Whatever. I'm struggling financially. Maybe I'm not supposed to do this. Because if I was supposed to do this, then it wouldn't be so difficult. And what people forget is that any calling comes with adversity. Dr. Martin Luther King, when he was marching in the streets, it's not like the police rolled over and said, Dr. King, we're so happy you're here. Let me march with you. We won't put the dogs on you today. No, every spiritual leader faces conflict and adversity. Jesus Christ, Mahatma Gandhi, Malcolm X, Kwame Nkrumah, you name it. And so an analogy I like to share with people, if all of the leaders of African countries stood up today and said no more European exploitation of Africa ever again, well, do we think that that's the way it's going to go, that there's going to be no pushback from these European powers? No, there's going to be pushback. So as you know, Malidoma Somé recently passed. So many people love his book and have been touched by his work, but they forget that this man was kidnapped. They
Yeah.
forget that. you
Yeah.
know they think that people tend to think that this calling thing is some picnic. It's not. He was kidnapped for many years. Then his own tribe did not accept him properly. Then he had to come to the United States. Then people were critical of him. Black people were critical of him for a lot of different reasons. Why are you sharing your knowledge with European people? European people didn't understand him. So he had he faced adversity all the time. Then his two wives died, one after the other. I mean, then he transitioned. So this was a man that faced a lot of adversity all the time. And so although people look to him for inspiration, it's like they forget all these things and they just want to be um, a stress, a no obstacle free journey. But that's not how life is. That's not what the journey is all about. And so part of the journey I feel is like we have to have the mentality of a warrior. That's how I see it. And we just have to be dedicated and disciplined, and we have to tell ourselves we're doing this no matter what, right? No matter how long it takes, no matter what I have to go through, I'm going to do it. To me, I feel whatever happens, happens. I feel that we have to approach a calling with some level of conviction, and just stick it out, you know, or as they say in the streets, just tug it out. That's how
No,
I feel.
it's so true, isn't it? Because it's not an easy journey at all. It's like once you accept that calling, and then you made a good point about Maladoma, about you're getting it from all angles, and it's so true. Uh, Very fascinating, but I will allow our audience to come through. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you so much, Katina, for your donation. That is truly appreciated. Thank you. We appreciate if anyone likes, comments, subscribe, and if you do want to donate as well, we appreciate that too, because as you said, James, we're doing this work for the passion. We've been on this journey, both of us been doing this for years. And as much as we may have certain things that we sell, it's never been about the money, because if we were doing it for the money, then that we wouldn't even started this journey. When you do this thing, you're doing it for the heart, because the backlash that you get from people who even say that they're supporting you is the weirdest thing.
Mhm.
So just like you gave the example of Maladoma Some, that he's been, for us, he personally was the one who set me on this African spiritual path. When I read of Water of Spirit, that was amazing. But it just goes to show the different opposing views that people can get when they do this work. But the questions are starting to come in, so I'm gonna go. Okay, so Tremaine says, just coming into this info now, how can I make sense of it in my everyday life?
So I would say is that what I would say is to find the parts of African spirituality that resonates with you, to find the things about that, what speaks to you, and focus on those things. So this is where self-awareness comes in, and understanding who we are, because there's so many ways we could approach it. A good friend of mine, she's also from the Virgin Islands. Her name is Ife Michelle. But a big part of her focus is dance. She's into the sacred dances of Lukumi. Um, she's also does healing work and mediumship work. But so a big part of her path happens to be dance, right? Now, I'm not into dance, but she is into dance and she's dedicated to that. So that's an example of having awareness of where you want to focus. Somebody may come to this tradition and maybe they might want to focus on medicine. Maybe someone wants to focus on poetry. I mean, there's so many lanes one could play in. Maybe you might create a book. So it's about finding the things that speak to you. And me, I'm into language. Speak Yoruba language. That's one of my focuses. I study that. So it's about finding what speaks to you. That and then being patient, not thinking that overnight we're going to be, having some super dialogue with Oshun or whatever, but just embracing this as a day to day, like a flower, as they say, the unfolding of a flower, the blossoming of a flower that takes time. So we have to just commit to it over time and being patient. That's what I would say, being patient, and not being in a rush, not feeling we have to have all of the answers, and also understanding that we are being guided and that we ourselves are divine. So it becomes becoming aware of our own divinity, understanding that no, we're not, none of us, we're not half a person, we're a whole person. And the reason why I say that is because we don't have to beg for other people to accept us. We don't need approval from somebody else. We're a whole person. I like to say we're a sovereign person. We're sovereign souls on planet Earth, And so once we have that confidence in ourselves, to me, who cares who comes into our lives and leaves? If they want to leave us, then leave us. That's how I feel, If someone wants to go from my life, leave my life then. You see, because too often we get into a position where either we have low esteem, self-esteem, and we're begging for other people to approve us. We want other people to like us. We don't need any of that. This is how I feel. If you don't like me, you don't like me. You know, if you want to go, go. You know, I'm not chasing anybody. This is how I feel. So we have to come to a place where we respect ourselves to know who we are as divine souls. And I believe we have to start looking at ourselves as gold, that we have something very valuable. Now, if other people don't see the value that we have, well, that's their problem. But if we approach it from the standpoint of us having gold, then it doesn't matter who sees it or not, because we see it, we know it.